Hey everyone, my name is Kelsey, and I want to show you how to paint a banana using a Zorn palette. It should be an interesting challenge since it's such a saturated object, and the Zorn palette is very desaturated. This will be a great exercise for beginners. The Zorn palette is titanium white, yellow ochre, cad red light, and ivory black. I like to put them on my palette from lightest to darkest value, and that just helps me make decisions while color mixing. So this is the reference photo I have. I got it from Unsplash. I can leave the link below if you're interested in making this yourself. I wanted to come up with a game plan for this because there are some interesting challenges here. I actually like to come up with a game plan for every painting I make. It doesn't have to be written down, but I always like to think about my goals for my painting, like how my color palette will work, my range of values, and maybe what I want to emphasize or de-emphasize. So there are a couple things to start for most of my paintings. The first one being a line drawing, which is pretty obvious, but it's important, so put it on the list. And the second thing I always do is I do all of my darks first. In this case, I'm going to be breaking up the banana into different sections and doing the darks first as I move from section to section. But no matter what, I always get the darks down first because that way it gives form to the banana almost immediately. The next challenge I see here is that the peel is lighter and more saturated than the yellow ochre I have on my palette. So my plan is to do the peel first, and the rest of the painting will be keyed to the saturation of the peel. I'm also going to add a little bit of cad red to the yellow ochre, and that'll make it a little more saturated. And the last thing I'm going to do is absolutely avoid adding any white to make it lighter, even though it'll be super duper tempting. Titanium white is very desaturating and very cooling, and is going to make it look weird. So the peel will just have to be that dark. The next problem I have is the background. I do not have a blue on my palette. I do have an ivory black. An ivory black is technically a very desaturated blue, so I could use a gray for the background, but I think that would be too cool toned, so I'm going to use a mixture of ivory black and yellow ochre, which makes a really nice olive green. Limited palettes like the Zorn palette can give really nice tonal qualities to paintings, and this would be a really good opportunity to do that. The last challenge I see is this peel on the right. I'm going to paint the orange lines first since they are actually the darkest, and then I'm going to be super mindful of the plane changes as I work my way down the peel and kind of carefully adjust value and temperature. When painting things that bend like this, I find it easiest to paint them from left to right or up and down to kind of inch along the object and carefully adjust value and temperature. Okay, let's jump into painting. I'm painting on Arches oil paper, and when I paint on oil paper, I like to put a thin layer of Gamblin solvent-free gel. It makes the paper a bit easier to paint on while keeping the really nice texture of the paper. I do not recommend doing this with linseed or any other kind of oil because it'll be way too slick. I'm starting the line drawing with a mixture of yellow ochre and cad red. I put in some guidelines that I don't want the peels to go past, but that's all I'm doing for measurements. I find that organic shapes like this are fine to freehand, but you can get your drawing down however you want. You can use a grid or trace it or whatever you feel comfortable with. Just get a drawing done. So first up is the outer peel, and I'm starting with the shadow shapes using a mixture of yellow ochre, cad red, and ivory black. And I'm putting this down anywhere I see a shadow, and I'm just going to adjust minor differences in value and temperature as I go along. I also see a glowing shadow under the peel on the right, so I'm adding that in as well. Then I just fill in the rest of the peel with a single color using a mixture of yellow ochre and cad red. And then I go back in and darken some of the shadows from before. So here I wasn't able to resist lightening the peel with white, and I immediately regretted it. It was so green. So I wiped it off and painted over it. You should always wipe off a color that is wrong instead of fighting to paint over it. You'll just make mud. So before I begin the light color of the banana, I'm going to add some of the background so that it's easier to judge the value. Just like any other part of the painting, I start with the dark shadows, which are right next to the banana, and I'm using a mixture of ivory black and yellow ochre. Then for the majority of the background, I'm using a mixture of ivory black with much more yellow ochre. You can see I'm holding my palette knife up to my painting. I do this to compare the color and value before I actually place anything on my surface. As I'm putting in my background, I'm also adjusting the edges of my drawing. So now I'm starting the actual banana on the shadow side, using a mixture of yellow ochre and titanium white. Then I fill in the light side with a mixture of mostly white and a touch of yellow ochre. Because the banana is so textured, the edge between the light and shadow is really undefined. So I soften that by tapping along the edge. Next, I'm starting the light side of the left peel, and I add the shadow using a mixture of yellow ochre, titanium white, and ivory black. Then I add in the light using a mixture of titanium white and yellow ochre. You can see some of the white color along the edge of the peel, so I add that in by flattening my brush and using the tip in a straight line. I'm deepening shadows again. As you add more things, things will start to look different to you. So for the peel on the right, I'm starting with these veins, which are actually the darkest part of the peel. I'm using a mixture of yellow ochre and cad red. Next, I'm laying down a mixture of yellow ochre and titanium white on the top part of the peel, where most of the light is hitting, but I'm leaving it a bit darker so I can add an even lighter color right at the top. This will make it feel more rounded and like the light is hitting it. Now I'm adding more background color because it's hard to see my drawing. There's a plane change here, and it's a very desaturated gray-brown, so I add a mixture of all my colors to get a neutral brown. Now I'm going back in, and I add the lightest color to the top of the peel. I keep inching my way down, and this color is a bit warmer, so I use more yellow ochre and cad red in this mix. I also use this color for the stem. As I keep moving down, the peel is much lighter and cooler, so I use yellow ochre and titanium white, and I add a really bright spot at the bottom. I adjust the shadow on the peel because it needed to be darker. And I add some dark spots to the stem using a warm brown. So now I'm doing the final touches and filling in the background. This is a good time to soften the edges and adjust the drawing as well. I decided the shadow to the left of my banana needed to be darker, but if I pulled my brush from left to right, it would get into my very light banana, so I flipped my hand around, and I even put my brush in my left hand. You should always be thinking about which way you're pulling your brush and how you need to move either your hand or your canvas to get the right brush stroke. And finally, I add some impasto to the flesh of the banana to make it more textured. And that's it. Here is the finished banana. I hope you enjoyed and that you learned something new. If you did, please like this video and subscribe. Thank you.